When my 7-year-old son Brody grabbed Dr. Williams by the coat and asked if he should tell him what Aunt Carol put in my prenatal vitamins, the entire delivery room went silent. My sister-in-law's face drained of color as my twins lay in the NICU, fighting for their lives. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here, to this moment where my entire world shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of a single sentence from a child. My name is Melinda, and I'm 32 years old. I teach 4th grade at Riverside Elementary here in Denver, or at least I did until the bed rest started. My husband Preston is 34, built like the construction manager he is, with calloused hands that can be surprisingly gentle when he brushes my hair back from my face. We'd been married 9 years when this nightmare began, 9 beautiful years that made me believe I understood what family meant. Preston's family seemed perfect when I first met them. His mother Vivian was the type who had fresh cookies whenever you visited, though she'd always mention how her recipe was better than whatever you brought to potlucks. His father Rex rarely spoke, but smiled often, especially when watching Preston work on projects around their house. And then there was Carol, Preston's older sister, 38 and childless, who always seemed to be watching from the edges of family gatherings with eyes that I now realize held something darker than mere observation. Our son Brody had just turned 7 when I got pregnant with the twins. He's one of those kids who notices everything, absorbs every detail like a sponge. Preston jokes that Brody got his detective skills from watching too many mystery shows with his grandpa Rex, but I think he was just born with this to see through the masks people wear. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing his homework while I cooked dinner, occasionally looking up to ask questions like, "Why does Aunt Carol always touch your belly when you're not looking?" Questions I should have paid more attention to. The day I found out I was carrying twins was supposed to be one of the happiest of our lives. Preston had taken the afternoon off work, something he rarely did to come to the ultrasound appointment. Brody was at school, but we'd promised to pick him up with the news. When the technician said 2 heartbeats, Preston actually gasped. His hand found mine and squeezed so tight I thought he might break my fingers, but I didn't care because I was squeezing back just as hard. "Twins run in my family," he'd said in wonder, staring at the screen where 2 tiny forms floated in their separate sacks. My grandmother was a twin, but I never thought we'd be lucky enough. Lucky. That word haunts me now. When we picked Brody up from school that day, we could barely contain ourselves. Preston was practically bouncing in the driver's seat, and I kept touching my still flat stomach, imagining it round with 2 babies. Brody climbed into his booster seat, took one look at our faces, and said, "Something good happened." Not a question, just his statement of observation. "2 babies, buddy," Preston said, watching him in the rearview mirror. "You're going to be a big brother to 2 babies." The joy on Brody's face was pure sunshine. 2? At the same time? Can I teach them both about dinosaurs? Will they sleep in the same crib? Can one be a boy and one be a girl? That would be perfect because then I could teach them different things. We laughed the whole way home, making plans, discussing names, imagining our family of 5. Preston called his parents to share the news, and within an hour they were at our door with Carol in tow. Vivian had tears in her eyes as she hugged me, whispering, "Finally, more grandbabies," in my ear, like Brody wasn't enough. But I let it slide in the happiness of the moment. Carol stood by our fireplace, her hand resting on the mantel, watching as everyone celebrated. "Twins are high risk," she said, her voice cutting through the joy like a knife through warm butter. "You'll need to be very careful, Melinda. Very careful about everything you put in your body." "Of course," I said, though something in her tone made my skin prickle. "Dr. Williams already has me on prenatal vitamins and extra folic acid." "Store-bought vitamins," she said with a dismissive wave, "full of fillers and who knows what else. I have a friend who makes organic ones. Much better for the babies. I'll bring them by tomorrow." Preston wrapped his arm around me. "That's thoughtful, Carol, but Melinda's doctor prescribed specific ones. Doctors get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies," Carol said, her lips pursing in that way that made her look so much like Vivian. "These are natural, pure. Wouldn't you want the best for your babies?" That was how it started, with an offer of help wrapped in criticism, tied with a bow of family obligation. Carol, who had never shown much interest in my first pregnancy with Brody, suddenly became my most devoted helper. She'd appear at our door 3 times a week with those unmarked vitamin bottles, watching as I took them, refusing to leave until she'd seen me swallow the pills. "Just making sure you don't forget," she'd say, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "These babies are too precious to take chances with." Life in our suburban Denver home was everything I dreamed of when Preston and I first got married. We'd bought the 4-bedroom colonial when I was pregnant with Brody, stretching our budget because Preston could see the potential in its bones. He spent weekends replacing floors, updating the kitchen, building a deck where we'd have summer barbecues with neighbors who became friends. The backyard had a massive oak tree that Brody claimed as his fortress, and Preston had hung a tire swing from its thickest branch. Our morning routine was sacred to me. Preston would be up at 5:30, the coffee maker gurgling to life while he showered. I'd wake to the smell of dark roast and the sound of him humming off-key in the bathroom. Brody would stumble into our room at 6:15 like clockwork, crawling between us for what he called sandwich hugs before we officially started our day. Those quiet moments with my boys on either side of me felt like armor against anything the world could throw at us. When the pregnancy test showed positive that March morning, I'd sat on the bathroom floor staring at it for so long that Preston knocked on the door asking if I'd fallen in. "We're having another baby," I called through the door, and I heard his work boots thunder up the stairs so fast I thought he might break them. The door flew open, and there he was, his face a mixture of disbelief and joy that made me start crying all over again. "Another baby," he kept repeating, pulling me up from the floor and into his arms. "Brody's going to be a big brother." The first ultrasound was scheduled for 8 weeks. Preston rearranged 3 meetings to be there, telling his foreman that some things were more important than concrete delivery schedules. When the technician spread the gel on my belly and started moving the wand, we held our breath. Then she smiled, turned the screen toward us, and said those 2 words that changed everything. 2 heartbeats. Preston's hand found mine instantly. "Twins?" His voice cracked like he was 16 again, not 34. "We're having twins?" "Congratulations," the technician said, pointing to 2 distinct sacs on the screen. 2 babies developing beautifully, both measuring right on schedule. The drive home was filled with a kind of giddy disbelief. Preston kept looking over at me at red lights, shaking his head and grinning. "Twins, Mel. And we're going to need a bigger car, and 2 cribs, and double everything." But he wasn't complaining. He was marveling. His hand kept finding my still, flat stomach whenever we stopped. Telling Brody became an event in itself. We picked him up from school with a cake that said Big Brother X2 and watched his 7-year-old mind process the information. 2 babies means I can teach 1 about T-Rex and 1 about velociraptors, he decided after careful consideration. This is way better than Jeremy's family. He only got 1 sister. That evening, Preston called his parents while I called mine in Portland. My mother cried happy tears over FaceTime, already planning her extended visit to help when the babies arrived. But it was Preston's family's reaction that set everything in motion, though I didn't see it at the time. Vivian arrived within the hour, carrying a casserole as if we'd experienced a death rather than announced new life. Rex followed behind her, quiet as always, offering Preston a congratulatory handshake that turned into a brief hug. Then Carol's car pulled into our driveway, and I watched from the window as she sat there for a full minute before getting out, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Twins are so high risk," were her first words upon entering. Not congratulations, not happiness for her brother, just an immediate reminder of what could go wrong. Vivian nodded sagely. "She's right, you know. My cousin lost twins at 20 weeks. You'll need to be so careful, Melinda. No stress, no lifting, nothing that could harm those precious babies." "Mom, please," Preston said, but Carol interrupted. "I'm just being realistic. Multiples require extra nutrition, extra vitamins, extra everything. The regular prenatal vitamins doctors prescribe aren't nearly enough." She studied me with an intensity that made me want to step back. "I know someone who specializes in fertility and pregnancy nutrition. She makes custom vitamin blends, all organic, perfectly balanced for multiple pregnancies." "That's kind of you," I started, but she was already pulling out her phone. "I'll have them for you tomorrow." "It's the least I can do for my future niece and nephew." She paused. "Or nephews, or nieces. Whatever they are, they deserve the best start possible. That night, as Preston and I lay in bed with his hand on my stomach, I should have listened to the tiny voice in my head that wondered why Carol, who had never shown interest in children, was suddenly so invested in mine. The vitamins Carol brought came in plain white bottles with handwritten labels that said only prenatal blend, take 2 daily. She arrived at our door the next morning at 7:30, catching me in my robe with uncombed hair and Brody's cereal bowl still on the table. "These need to be taken with food," she instructed, setting the bottle on my kitchen counter with a decisive thud. 2 pills every morning, no exceptions. My friend makes them in small batches, so they're absolutely fresh. I picked up the bottle, noting its weight. "Carol, this is really generous, but my doctor already has me on prenatals. I don't want to overdo anything." Her face tightened, and for a moment she looked exactly like Vivian when someone suggested her pot roast was dry. "Are you really going to trust mass-produced pills over something made specifically for carrying multiples?" "I researched this extensively, Melinda. These have extra folic acid, calcium, and minerals that twins will leach from your body." Preston walked in, adjusting his tie, caught the tension immediately. "Everything okay?" "I brought Melinda proper vitamins," Carol said, her tone suggesting I was being difficult. But apparently she prefers whatever generic brand her doctor is getting kickbacks to prescribe. "That's not what I said," I protested. But Preston was already trying to keep peace. "Carol went to a lot of trouble, Mel. Maybe just try them?" Looking back, I should have stood my ground. But I was 20 weeks pregnant, hormonal, and the last thing I wanted was family drama. So I took the vitamins while Carol watched, her eyes tracking the pills from bottle to mouth to throat as I swallowed. "Good," she said with satisfaction. "I'll bring more next week." And she did. Every single week, Carol appeared with a new bottle, often staying to watch me take them. If I mentioned feeling tired or nauseous, she'd nod knowingly. That's normal with twins. They take everything from you. By week 30, I was exhausted beyond anything I'd experienced with Brody. Dr. Williams noted my iron levels were low despite supplementation, and my blood pressure kept spiking randomly. "Twins are harder on the body," he said, increasing my monitoring to twice weekly. "But something seems off. Are you taking anything besides what I prescribed?" I mentioned Carol's vitamins, and he frowned. "I'd prefer you stick to regulated supplements. Can you bring them in for me to look at?" But when I told Carol I wanted to have them tested, she exploded. "Tested? Like I'm trying to poison you? I'm trying to help, Melinda. I'm the only one who seems to understand how serious this pregnancy is." Vivian backed her daughter completely. She'd started coming by daily, examining my swollen ankles, commenting on my complexion, always finding something wrong. "You look pale," she'd say. "Weak. These babies are taking too much from you. Thank God Carol found those vitamins, or who knows what would happen." Preston was caught in the middle, working longer hours as the pregnancy progressed because we needed the overtime pay for 2 of everything. He'd come home to find me crying on the couch, Carol and Vivian hovering, and he'd just look lost. At 34 weeks, I woke at 3 in the morning with pain shooting through my abdomen. Preston called 911 while Brody stood in his dinosaur pajamas, watching with wide eyes as the paramedics carried me out. "Take care of your dad," I managed to tell him, before the contractions stole my breath. The emergency C-section was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. I remember hearing fetal distress, and both babies before the anesthesia took me under. When I woke, Preston was beside me, his face haggard, his work clothes still dirty from the job site. "The babies," I whispered. "They're alive," he said, and the way he said it told me everything else was wrong. Garrett and Piper were in the NICU, each in their own incubator, so tiny and fragile, they looked like birds that had fallen from their nest too soon. Tubes and wires connected them to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping track of heartbeats that shouldn't have needed such monitoring. Dr. Williams delivered the news gently, but directly. "They're showing signs of neurological distress and organ strain. We're running comprehensive tests, but there appears to be some kind of toxic exposure. Have you been exposed to any chemicals? Lead? Mercury? Anything unusual?" That's when Carol walked in with Vivian, and instead of rushing to comfort us, Carol looked at those tiny babies and sneered. Actually sneered. "Well," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "God has his ways of punishing sinful mothers." The NICU went silent except for the machines. Even the nurses stopped what they were doing to stare. Preston's face transformed into something I'd never seen before, not even when a drunk driver hit our car 3 years ago. His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding, and his hands balled into fists that shook with barely controlled rage. "What did you just say to my wife?" Carol didn't back down. She stepped further into the NICU, her heels clicking against the sterile floor like countdown timer. "I'm saying that sometimes there are consequences for actions. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves through innocent children." "Carol, that's enough," Rex said sharply from where he'd been standing with Brody near the door. It was the most forceful I'd ever heard Preston's father speak. But Vivian moved to stand beside her daughter, her hand finding Carol's arm in solidarity. "She's not wrong, though. These things don't happen in our family, Preston. Look at our genetics. Strong, healthy babies for generations. But sometimes when mothers hide things, when they do things they shouldn't during pregnancy, innocent babies pay for their mother's mistakes." I was sobbing now, ugly, hormone-fueled sobs that made my C-section incision burn. I didn't do anything wrong. I managed between gasps. I took care of myself. I took every vitamin, followed every rule, did everything right. "Every vitamin," Carol repeated, and something in her tone made me look up. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Yes, you certainly did take every vitamin I brought you, didn't you?" A nurse approached, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep your voices down or take this conversation outside. This is a NICU." That's when Brody moved. My 7-year-old son, who'd been standing so quietly beside his grandfather that I'd almost forgotten he was there, walked with deliberate steps across the room. He passed his father, past his crying mother, past his condemning aunt and grandmother, and walked straight to Dr. Williams, who was reviewing charts at the nurse's station. Brody reached up and tugged on the doctor's white coat, not aggressively, but with the firm determination of a child who has something important to say. Dr. Williams looked down, and I saw his expression soften at the serious look on Brody's face. "Dr. Williams," Brody said, his voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence, "should I tell you what Aunt Carol put in the medicine?" The words hung in the air like suspended glass, ready to shatter. Carol's face went from smug to white in less than a second. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish, gasping for air. "What nonsense is this child saying?" she finally managed, but her voice had gone high and thin. Brody didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Dr. Williams, who had knelt down to bring himself to Brody's eye level. "What medicine are you talking about, buddy?" the doctor asked gently. "The vitamins Aunt Carol gave Mommy?" "The ones in the white bottles. She put other stuff in them. I saw her in her kitchen. She had a different bottle and she was mixing something." Preston moved then, positioning himself between Carol and the exit. "Keep talking, son." Brody's small hands twisted the hem of his shirt, but his voice stayed steady. "It was last month when I went to Aunt Carol's house with Grandma Vivian. They were talking in the living room about boring stuff, so I went to find somewhere to play. I was playing hide and seek by myself, seeing how many good hiding spots I could find for next time my cousins visit." He glanced at me, seeking permission to continue, and I nodded even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I went into the kitchen and saw Aunt Carol's pantry door was open. It's big, bigger than ours, with lots of shelves. I thought it would be a good hiding spot, so I went in. I was behind the big flour containers when Aunt Carol came in. She didn't know I was there. Dr. Williams pulled out his phone, typing quickly. "What did you see her do, Brody?" "She had Mommy's vitamin bottle, the white one with the writing on it, and she had another container, a different one. It had a skull and crossbones on it, like the bottles under our sink that Mommy says never to touch. She was pouring powder from the skull bottle into Mommy's vitamins. She used a little funnel and she was very careful. Then she shook the vitamin bottle to mix it up." "You're lying," Carol hissed, but her voice was desperate now. "Children make things up all the time." He's confused. Brody finally looked at his aunt. "You said it would make the babies weak. I heard you talking on the phone when you were shaking the bottle. You said..." This will show her she's not so perfect. Doctor. William stood up slowly, his phone already at his ear. Security to NICU immediately, and get the police here now. He turned to me with an urgency I'd never seen from him before. Do you still have any of those vitamins? In my hospital bag, I whispered, pointing to the floral tote in the corner. I brought them because Carol said I should keep taking them even after delivery. For breastfeeding. A security guard appeared within seconds, blocking the exit as doctor. Williams retrieved the bottle from my bag, holding it carefully with a tissue. Carol made a movement toward him, but Preston stepped forward and she froze. You don't actually believe this ridiculous story, Carol said, but her confident facade was cracking. I was helping. Those vitamins cost me a fortune. They were specially made. Then you won't mind if we test them, Dr. Williams said. He was already barking orders to nurses. Get a rush tox screen on both babies specifically for heavy metals, lead, mercury, arsenic, everything, and get this bottle to the lab immediately. Vivian had gone silent, staring at her daughter with growing horror. Carol, what did you do? Nothing. I helped her. I gave her the best vitamins money could buy. But Carol's voice was shrill now, desperate. 2 police officers arrived, and Dr. Williams briefed them quickly. One took the vitamin bottle as evidence, while the other began questioning Brody gently, away from Carol but where I could still see him. Preston never moved from his position, blocking his sister's exit. Mrs. Morrison, the officer addressed me, we'll need to search your home for any remaining vitamins, and we'll need permission to search Ms. Carol Morrison's residence. You need a warrant for that, Carol snapped. We'll get one, the officer replied calmly. Or you can cooperate now and explain why a 7-year-old would make up such a specific story. The lab results came back in 2 hours, though they felt like 2 years. Dr. Williams returned with several other doctors and a grim expression. The vitamins contain lead acetate at dangerous levels. It's sweet tasting, which would mask any unusual flavor, and it's been building up in your system for months. Lead? Preston's voice was hollow. She poisoned my wife with lead? The accumulation in the twin systems indicates prolonged exposure through the placental barrier, another doctor explained. This wasn't accidental contamination. These levels suggest deliberate, measured doses designed to cause maximum fetal damage while keeping the mother functional. Carol tried to run then, actually shoved past the security guard, but Preston caught her arm. You're not going anywhere. The police arrested her immediately, but the real revelation came 3 hours later when they searched her house. The detective returned to the hospital with an evidence bag and a disgusted expression. We found everything, he told us. Lead acetate ordered online under a fake name, shipped to a P.O. box, empty vitamin bottles from your actual pharmacy that she'd apparently been intercepting, a journal documenting her plan, and a laptop with searches dating back 8 months about substances that cause birth defects. He handed Preston a photocopy of one journal page, and I watched my husband's face crumble as he read his sister's words aloud. Melinda doesn't deserve perfect children when I can't have any. Preston chose wrong. He should have married someone from our circle, someone who understood that some women are meant to be mothers and others aren't. If her babies are damaged, maybe he'll finally see the truth. Maybe he'll leave her and find someone worthy of the Morrison name, someone who won't flaunt her fertility in front of those of us who God deemed unfit for motherhood. Vivian collapsed into Rex's arms. My daughter did this? My Carol? The detective continued. She started with small amounts after your first trimester, gradually increasing the dose. According to her research history, she knew exactly how much to give to cause developmental damage without triggering a miscarriage that would be investigated. She researched it, I said numbly. She researched how to poison my babies. Your son is a hero, the detective told us. His observation skills and courage to speak up means these babies can start treatment immediately. The earlier lead poisoning is addressed, the better the outcome. Dr. Williams was already implementing treatment protocols. We'll start chelation therapy immediately for both babies. It binds to the lead and helps eliminate it from their systems. The sooner we act, the more damage we can prevent. Brody was sitting with Rex now, looking small and frightened. Did I do good, Mommy? He asked. I wanted to tell earlier, but Aunt Carol said if I ever told anyone about her special medicine work, she'd make sure my hermit crabs died. She said it that day in the pantry when she found me there after. She knew I was watching. Preston gathered Brody into his arms, holding him tight. You did perfect, buddy. You saved your brother and sister. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Carol, wearing a gray suit that made her look older than her 38 years, sat with her lawyers as witness after witness testified about the elaborate scheme she'd orchestrated. The pharmacist identified her as the woman who'd been picking up my prescriptions, as a favor for her sister-in-law for months. The online retailer confirmed the lead acetate purchases. Her own journal entries were read aloud in court, each one more damning than the last. She was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. When the verdict was read, she looked directly at me for the first time since her arrest. They were never supposed to live, she said flatly. You were supposed to miscarry, and everyone would comfort you and life would go on. I didn't mean for them to suffer. The judge added another year for that statement alone. Vivian filed for divorce from Rex 2 months after the trial. She couldn't face what her daughter had done, or more importantly, her own role in fostering the toxic jealousy that had festered for years. She moved to Florida without a forwarding address, sending one letter of apology that Preston burned without opening. She spent 38 years telling Carol she was special while making you feel like an outsider, he said. She doesn't get to apologize now. Rex, freed from Vivian's shadow, became a different man. He moved closer to us, buying a small condo 10 minutes away. He comes over every Wednesday to work with the twins on their therapy exercises, his patience endless as he helps Garrett with his sensory activities or guides Piper through her motor skills practice. The twins are 3 years old now. Yes, the lead exposure caused damage that we deal with every single day. Garrett has mild autism and struggles with sensory processing. Loud noises send him into a panic, and transitions are hard. But he's also brilliant with numbers, can name every dinosaur Brody teaches him, and gives the tightest, most genuine hugs I've ever received. His laugh, when it comes, is pure joy. Piper has cerebral palsy affecting her left side. Physical therapy 3 times a week has become our routine, and she fights through each session with determination that amazes her therapists. She's verbal and articulate beyond her years, often translating what Garrett needs when he can't find the words. She calls herself his protector, even though she's technically younger by 3 minutes. Brody, now 10, has become their fiercest advocate. He researches their conditions with the dedication of a medical student, celebrates every milestone like it's the World Series, and corrects anyone who uses outdated terminology about disabilities. At school, he gave a presentation about his siblings that made his teacher cry. They're not broken, he said firmly. They're just built different. They fought poison before they were even born. That makes them superheroes. Preston left his construction management job 6 months after the twins came home from the NICU. The rigid schedule didn't work with therapy appointments and specialist visits. He started his own contracting business, smaller but more flexible. Some weeks are tight financially, but he's there for every important moment. I watch him doing physical therapy exercises with Piper, his construction worker hands impossibly gentle as he helps her stretch, or see him lying on the floor with Garrett, both of them under weighted blankets watching the ceiling fans spin, and I fall in love with him all over again. The real lesson came during a recent appointment with Dr. Williams. We were discussing the twins' progress when he said something that stopped me cold. Evil often hides behind a helpful smile. But truth has a way of speaking through the most unexpected voices, even a 7-year-old boy who chose courage over comfort. He was right. Carol had hidden her malice behind offers of help, behind family loyalty, behind concern for my pregnancy. She'd weaponized kindness itself, turning vitamins meant to nurture life into vehicles for destruction. But she hadn't counted on Brody, a child who saw through her facade and found the courage to speak when it mattered most. Our family doesn't look like the one in the Christmas cards we used to send. We're scarred, certainly. There are daily challenges that other families don't face, but we're also stronger. We learned that family isn't about blood or perfect genetics or maintaining appearances. Family is Rex doing puzzle therapy with Garrett every Wednesday. It's Brody reading to his siblings every night, making different voices for each character. It's Preston and me, exhausted after therapy appointments, choosing to dance in the kitchen anyway because Piper loves music. The twins' challenges remain, but so does our love. And that love, unlike Carol's twisted vitamins, is the real medicine that heals. If this story resonated with you, please share it with others who need to hear that families can survive the unthinkable. Like this video if you believe in the power of truth, no matter who speaks it. Comment below with your own thoughts about family, resilience, and the courage of children. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of human strength in the face of adversity. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives that remind us all of the power of love over hate, truth over deception, and the incredible strength that comes from standing together.